So, for those listeners out there, if you've been wondering how to crack the code to getting yourself published, to talking to editors, to get in front of those people that can really get you in the magazines, then you're going to definitely want to listen up, grab a big new pad and a pen, and start to take some notes. Because my guest today, who's Michael Korb, has been a syndicated newspaper columnist for more than 20 years. And his work has appeared regularly in such outlets as the Chicago Tribune, the LA Times, the Toronto Star, the Miami Herald, and others. And he's been covering television, fashion, and entertainment. And for more than a decade, he's been an editor and writer for Gulf Shore Life magazine here in Naples, Florida, specifically covering interiors and luxury design in both their Gulf Shore Life magazine and their annual home magazine, which just rebranded not too long ago, and it is stunning. And he understands what magazines are looking for from interior designers, and that's what we're going to deep dive into today. So welcome, Michael.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited because we were chit-chatting a little bit before we hit record, and we were just really talking about how editors feel intimidating to us as designers. We feel like we don't know how to find them. We don't know if we're requesting, if it's going to feel welcomed. We don't know if our work's good enough. There's a whole bunch of stuff wrapped up into that. And you talked about something that was really interesting. You're like, it's so easy. Like, are we going to have enough to talk about? Because it's so simple. So my first question to you is going to be, what are the key elements that you're looking for in a project when when somebody comes to you from an interior designer comes to you?
Yeah, the one thing you must have is great imagery, right? So while you're very busy working with your client to create whatever it is that they want,
right?
And it could come out spectacular. I mean, you could walk into any place and just be like, this is a beautiful, beautiful place. But if the images don't explain that, right? If the images don't capture the awesomeness of it, well, then we're not going to care. I mean, that's the thing you must understand. The image will be everything. Yes, obviously you're working for your client and they need to be happy, and that's great. But if you want to get it in a magazine that you're really interested in, those images have to be spectacular. You would have to sit there and say, yes, this should be in a magazine.
Yes.
Right.
So,
and right. So
what is that?
What is that?
That you're looking for from your perspective as an editor? What tells that story?
It's what you would call, I suppose, from a styling point of view, it's the edit.
Okay.
Right. And so we are dealing with a window that is, this big for the magazine, right? It's a small bit of real estate that has to capture whatever you want to capture for that room. Yeah. And you would be surprised how rarely that happens. And it's you being off by inches from a photographer's point of view, right? So, and this is where an interior designer is going to be certainly super important, but the photographer is super important.
I wrote a note that the photographer seems to be a key element here, right?
It is the key, right? The photographer is the difference between you getting in a magazine and you not getting in a magazine.
Wow.
And so if you choose, if you're just starting out, if you're a new interior designer, you may not realize that level of importance, that you must have a professional photographer who knows what they're doing. You can't, and I'm not bashing regular photographers or a standard photographer, but you're not going to want to choose your wedding photographer, right, to come in and shoot your project. They're not going to know the angles. They're not going to know how to do the lighting properly. They're not going to know exactly how this should be shot for a vertical or for a horizontal or for a square. And so what any designer needs to do is really look at magazines, right? Which I'm sure they are, but to really critique each image, right? And you're going to go through and see that we've edited it, and they can be cropped. Like we will crop an image that is sent to us if it needs to be cropped. If there's something that we like a little bit more to this side, that side. That is an art direction thing, and is myself as an editor or writer, I don't interact a ton with the art department. I mean, it depends on the publication. The bigger, shinier the publication is, the more separation there are between some of these departments.
Yep.
So like back in the day, I really would work with an art director about, this is the image I want. Let's crop it to be a little tighter on this. And I could at least make that suggestion, right? The art director didn't necessarily need to listen to me because they're the art director.
Let me ask you a question about that, just to give people perspective, because you mentioned the size of the publication. So the publications that we're talking about that you're involved in, which is Gulf Shore Life and Home Magazine, what is the readership of those publications?
So like the circulation is probably fairly small as, and I don't have current numbers. I know back in the day when I was full-time, so I'm not full-time at the magazine. I am now freelance because I do a lot of other things. But when I was full-time, I would argue that the circulation was probably in the mid to upper 20s thousands.
Okay.
And that's not small. It's not big. However, the market is what matters.
Okay.
Right? So if we went to some small,
we'll dive into that. Why just tell us about the market that you're in right now, and how that affects the type of projects that you consider.
So Naples is a very unique town, right? It's a city, but it kind of feels like a small town.
Right.
But it's unbelievably wealthy, right? The money is just dripping in this town. So we have the best of everything, arguably, when it comes to design, architects, builders, shopping, etc. Naples is not shying away from things.
Right.
And so we are very lucky that we are dealing with designers, and it's not even just local designers, right? So we do have spectacular local designers, but these people can afford to bring someone in from Paris if they want. They could bring someone from Chicago. They can bring somebody from Boston. And they do, right? They will bring in these designers from all over the world. And we're looking at, like, for Gulf Shore Life and for Home. But Home tends to be because it's an annual, it's one issue, normally comes out in January. It is what we've been kind of collecting over the year, right? Okay. And we're curating what we like to think of as the best of the best.
Super special project.
Yeah, super special. And there's a real story, there's a real visual element to it that is powerful. Gulf Shore Life is a monthly. Still a stunning, beautiful magazine, one of the thickest magazines in the country, which is crazy to think about. But, we are bigger than most national magazines as a page count, for sure. And it's because we sell ads. I mean, we have people that can afford to take out ads. And so when you have ads, you can have more pages. And so that's how that works. But Naples specifically, I mean, the materials used are off the charts.
Top notch. Yep.
Absolutely the best of the best.
Yep.
And because of that, people create beautiful things. And I'm not saying
we have a lot of like churn here. Like people are moving, people can afford to renovate. There's, we have hurricanes.
Yes.
We're talking about that. So there's a lot of opportunities and projects for you to be.
Yes, and that's an interesting thing about Florida and Naples specifically. You're absolutely right. People will knock down a house, even if it's 5 years old. They'll knock it down and put up a new, bigger house.
Yeah.
And that's a real interesting challenge, because for your listeners who are elsewhere in the country,
right,
that presents a different challenge for an editor or a writer so I'm from New York. Right, I'm originally a New Yorker, And I started my writing career in upstate New York,
Mhm.
and the place was filled with real gems, right? Like Victorian mansions
Mhm.
and beautiful brownstones and things of that nature that had a history that could be told,
Right.
right? And so now, as an editor, I'm looking at, oh, what does this house tell? What is the story behind this house? In
Mhm.
addition to the design, the interior designer is working on this, and the thought that we're incorporating perhaps antiques, right? We're incorporating old school molding that was, 200 something years old. So
Right.
stuff like that is a different story. So
Yeah.
if you are a designer in Boston, or if you're a designer somewhere else where you've got actual older projects, what I'm talking about will feel a little foreign when it comes to Naples, because Naples doesn't have that. In New York, if I write a story in New York, it's often about who owned this house
100
before.
years ago, literally. Yeah.
Exactly. I did a story on it's called the Madame Jamel house. This is an old story, but on the Madame Jamel house, Madame Jamel was a very interesting character during the Revolutionary War era,
Mhm.
and married Aaron Burr, who famously shot Alexander Hamilton. And
Right.
so this was their house, and I'm writing about, yeah, obviously the current owner, but in addition, the story that's the history of the house. I don't get any of that in Naples,
Yeah.
right? I don't get any of that in Southwest Florida. I
Isn't
get
it almost
brand new
more now
stuff.
about who owns the house or some interesting, feature that they've included?
Right. It's really about aesthetics here, because even when you get to who owns the house, these people, it's a shift. Again, New York was a very different place than this place. And people here don't really like publicity
Yeah.
as
Like
much
the quiet
as,
million billionaires, I should say, not.
yeah, they're very private.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of money, and they don't necessarily need to show off, want to show off, and they don't necessarily want people to know where they live.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
I've had a feature on a beautiful house on the beach, and we couldn't mention the homeowner because they didn't want anybody back home to know how much money they really
Yeah.
had.
Yep. Very
It's
private.
one of those things.
Yep.
But regardless of all that, we're still talking about the interior design and how great that has got to be. And that's the linchpin for anything, right? You've got to have really amazing work for this magazine,
Yeah.
right? If
So
it's a smaller small town magazine,
yep.
again, I wrote for them as well. My standards aren't going to be as high for that magazine, just because the market's not going to give me the same product.
Product. But let's think about this. If we can impart to other people who are in other places the level of quality that you're expecting, if they can move towards that, they're going to be heads and tails above the other
Oh
people
yeah.
in their market. So they will get chosen. So let's kind of circle back. There's two things that I think deserve, kind of revisiting. One is your photographer, because I was going to ask you as well, because this is something that's, come up in my own work, is you obviously you want to align yourself with a photographer that creates photographs that are appealing to you. I'm saying me as the designer personally, because
Mm-hmm.
there are certain photographers in the area that the way that they shoot, and maybe some of the filters they use or things like that, it looks off to me personally.
Sure.
So you have to choose your photographer that's in alignment aesthetically with how you want your photographs to look, because obviously it's your portfolio. But then on the other side, you want to also align yourself with a photographer that has relationships with the local magazines in your area, correct? Because they can also pitch things, right?
Yeah, that happens less, at least
Okay.
in my career, has been a lot less of a photographer coming to me and saying,
So it's
you
a
wouldn't
designer,
believe this place.
or you're searching out.
It's always either a designer reaching out to me, a builder reaching out to me, the architect, or I'm searching. And it's mostly the latter. It's normally me
Yes.
going and
You
talking to
have
people
anything?
and firing off. Yeah, do you have anything? Because we are a machine
Yep.
that needs content, right? You're the fuel
Yep.
for that machine. Um, but we are still the gatekeepers,
Yep.
right? We're going to keep the bad, we say bad stuff out, arguably, right?
Well,
And
you're
it's not that it's
filtering.
bad, but it's not going to keep,
Yeah.
there's a level that people would expect.
It's on brand.
And
Let's just say, I think
that's
designers
exactly right. That's
are
exactly what it is.
going to be
It
projects that
needs
are
to,
on brand.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that does not mean, and you may get to this later, but it doesn't mean that we're necessarily looking for a certain trend or we're going to stick to a certain formula. We really are cool with mixing it up, right? So if it's a traditional, we can still put a traditional, even though we are clearly moving
Out of that here.
out,
Yeah.
right? And we are finally getting to more of a modern, legit contemporary kind of vibe.
Right.
But we still like to have that. We like to have a mix, especially if it's in home where you're going to be flipping through huge, it's a big magazine, and you flip through it and you're going to see could be 16 other houses, right? It's great to have variety.
Stop the scroll in the magazine world too, right?
Right, exactly. You need to have something that like, oh, look at this.
Yes.
This is different. We can't look at everything as being the same. That's a real challenge, again, when we come back, talk about Naples and Southwest Florida and where there's a lot of churn, right? And there's a lot of new construction. People, a lot of these houses were built at the same time. They're part of that same frame. You're going to get the same.
Yeah.
And that's the real challenge for an editor.
You guys
is to
almost
find
have to
something.
ferret out, unusual, maybe lesser known designers. Because certainly I'm sure, especially in this market, there's, the same top 10 or top 20.
Sure.
We have a lot of designers here. So I'm just giving
right.
our audience some perspective. We have the most number of designers per square mile, like in the country. So we have a lot of designers.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that there's probably the same, 10% that you can always go to, and they're doing incredible work in amazing homes. And then I'm sure you have your other little like corners of the world where you try to ferret out some designers that, are not in the everyday conversations to find some different perspectives, right?
Absolutely. But, we only know what we know at any given point. And so, it comes down to beating bushes. And like I said, I'm normally the one, speaking for me, we have other editors who do this too. So it's not like I'm the only voice taking place here. But
to know that there's multiple editors looking for projects, right? That's
absolutely right. Absolutely. And again, that's because I'm freelance now versus being full-time in the office, even though we would have still had a hierarchy. Like we have an editor in chief. So she would be the
final say,
real decision maker. Okay. And so she's got great taste. She's going to say yes or no to this. And she may also say, you know what, this month I would like something traditional. Can we find something that's more traditional? Or next month, we're really doing the indoor outdoor living type scenario. Let's try to find a place that's got some spectacular outdoor living spaces. So anyway, that's just kind of like.
You bring up a great point though, because this was one of my questions. Is there a place where designers can look for an editorial calendar so they could pitch projects that have to do with, certain themes that you guys have coming up? Or is that generally not done anymore and they just need to, send things as they come along?
Well, you should always send things as they come because you want the latest and greatest to get its shot, right?
Gotcha.
As far as editorial calendars go, that's like an ebb and flow. Sometimes, yes, we're into it. Sometimes we're not into it. Chances are editorial calendars tend to be more of a project of the advertising side of things, right? Because they like to know what's happening. They like to know what's coming up and they like to sell around that, right? I mean, these are businesses.
Right.
And so, yes, there will be issues that are, let's say, green related, right? So now we're going, this is going to be the green issue. And so if we could find a home that has a lot of that sustainability stuff, then that would be great. But to try to time these things is so unbelievably difficult.
So just send it along. Send it along.
Send it along. That's what I would say.
I would
say do not be bashful. Never be bashful because we literally are looking for things all the time. And so for home, yes, that's once a year. And yes, we will, once we get it, we'll grab it and hold on to it and let you know that we're holding on to it. But for Gulf Shore Life, that's a monthly, right? For any other magazine that's a monthly,
Yep.
well, if they've got a home feature every month like we do, and many of them do, then every month you're going to need new product.
Right.
And so you may as well send this thing in to us
Yeah, just assume they
and
need
let us know.
content. Yes, so let's just
Assume it, because it's absolutely true.
yeah, and let me ask you a detailed question. We talked briefly about great photography that tells a story, but I know I get asked this all the time, so I'm going to ask it to you. Horizontal versus vertical, is there a preference? Do you care? Do you want wide shots, detail shots? What do you want, a variety? What is appealing?
The answer is yes, Pam.
Yes,
The
all of
answer
it.
is yes. We want all of it.
Okay.
And truly, we want all of it, because as you spread this thing out, you
Mhm.
certainly can't just do one, right? You
And you
couldn't
always
just
want
send
like
me a
10
bunch.
shots, Michael. So like you're always like, give me 10 shots, give me 10, 12 shots, right?
Give me 10 or 12 shots. Here's what I would say. An art director could correct me on this, but I don't know that they would. If you gave me 10 or 12 great shots, my work is done
Yeah,
in
because
that
you can
scenario.
call that down, right, to whatever.
Absolutely. Right. But I mean, there's plenty of times come home. I mean, we could be doing 16, 20 pages on one house,
Yeah.
right?
To Naples.
So,
So,
and it's going to be blown, the one image could be across the 2 pages, and now that's just one image. And now we've got, so just be aware that more is better
yeah.
under those circumstances. But you do want the variety. You want to be able to give me verticals. You want to give me horizontals. They don't need to be of the same thing, right, per se. So if you go out into the great room and you've found this shot, you can. But to kind of backtrack a little bit, I don't want you to send me 300 photos,
Right.
right? Do not do that,
Yeah, no,
because
no.
now
I think 10 or
now
12 is probably more than enough for most designers.
10 or 12 is normally enough if they're great.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure, 18, you know what I mean, type scenario.
Yeah.
But don't go crazy and send me 10 shots of a guest bedroom,
Yeah.
right?
Of the
Because
same one. Yeah.
yeah, you're right, of the same guest bedroom, you know what I mean? And just
Right.
have different, I don't need that. But I do think you should be mindful when you're in a great room, or well, it doesn't matter what the room is. There's more opportunity in a great room, or maybe a master bedroom or something. But I would say you have opportunities for vignettes. Okay.
Mhm.
And so here we can do a tight shot on the bookshelf, right? Or something off the coffee table. And we can be creative in those things. Or here's a chair in the corner mindfully by itself. You know what I mean? Like there are moments.
For a reason too. I mean, do you want to know? Do you want us to be giving you some of these, some of these stories behind this or some background as we submit photos?
So not I want you to be aware if there are stories, right? And again, because we deal in a community that newness is a fact of life, right? Like everything is brand new. There is no story under most circumstances. Now, if somebody has gone to Paris and they found this thing at the market and they had it shipped by freighter back, like if there's a story to be told, absolutely let us know,
Yeah.
right? Or if they were inspired, if you were inspired, if the homeowner was inspired by something, that's a great story and absolutely we want to know. I don't personally get a lot of stories before the images, right? Or even with images. I
Mhm.
get images because I'm solely focused on how great an image is.
And
That's what's selling
you
me
want
on
the image to speak for itself then. Back to your whole point.
100%, 100%. But that's here again. You know what I
That
mean?
could
If
be
I'm in New
different if you're
York,
in your area. Mhm.
yes. If I was in Boston, right, where there's history everywhere, the image may only tell us part,
Right.
right? And now I need to know what the other part is that I can't figure out of the image. So that is true. But for Naples, you're really just like, oh, what should we what can we see? What is the story behind that? Most of the time, the story is, this is from a designer, this piece came from someplace in Italy,
Right.
or who knows what the story is, but the story doesn't tend to be the same like you would think of a normal story.
So
It's
depending on
it's
where
about
you're
the same.
located, for the designers that are listening, you have to be mindful of what your editors are looking for. So this is going to beg the next question: is one, what title should we be looking for at this magazine? Like, who should we be submitting information to? And then two, we need to be doing our homework, I'm assuming, on, really understanding the aesthetics of the magazine and the area that we live in, to,
Sure.
to, kind of capture the attention of.
Right. You want to know the magazines. So wherever you are,
Mhm.
know the magazine, know where you want to pitch,
Yeah.
right? So each magazine is unique. We live in, like I said, Naples is a very interesting place because we are not the only game in town for magazines.
Oh my God,
I
we have
think
so
there
many
are,
magazines here.
right, there are like maybe 5 home and design magazines,
Hmm.
I think, or at least that feature houses.
Right.
And there could be more, to be quite honest with you, but they would be, smaller
Yeah.
tier magazines.
Hmm.
And so you are here, you have a lot of options, and every magazine is different, even though it's a home magazine and it's a home magazine in Florida,
Right.
they could operate differently, right? So, and I can't speak particularly intelligently how some of the other magazines operate. There is a thing that is real, and we don't really operate this way. We've been around for 50 years as a magazine. But some places now there's a thing called pay to play, right?
Yes, the
And so,
advertorial version
right, the advertorial
and add it to
scenario,
the magazine.
and I
Mhm.
think they really want you to take out an ad.
Yes.
Um, and, but I don't know that anybody can anybody can take it on ad. That's not
But
a
not
shock.
anybody's going to get the advertorial without
Right.
the quality
Correct.
projects or shots.
Right. Exactly. So if you have a really terrible, 1 bedroom, whatever,
Yeah.
even if you take an ad out, I imagine those magazines aren't going to feature it. But some, if you got a good place and you want to kind of guarantee placement, some of those magazines operate like that. And I'm not calling anybody out. The
Just be
magazine
aware of
business
it, right?
model has changed,
Yeah. Mhm.
right? It's not a thing for Gulf Shore Life, only because, we only feature one house in Gulf Shore Life. And I really don't care if you take out an ad or not. I'm looking for the best
Right.
project, right?
Different. Okay.
So that's, just to be mindful. If some magazine, maybe it's easier to get in if you take out the ad, but that's not the case all the time, and that would not be a thing that I would be thinking about or worrying about right off the bat as I'm trying to get my home in a magazine.
Right. And then who at a magazine would we want to get in touch with? Is it multiple people? Is it just one person? What title should we be looking for?
So again, every magazine is unique to itself, and depending on the size of the magazine, you're going to be dealing with different different titles. So if it's a small magazine, you may as well just go to the top, right?
Right.
And find the editor or editor in chief.
Okay.
And you can do that. But I would always hedge my bets and say, let me reach out to the associate editor as well.
Okay.
I don't think it offends anyone to get, to be on a multiple chain
Yeah.
scenario,
Yeah.
and just be polite and explain, hey, I'm a new, assuming you're new, right? Because if you've been around forever, you may already know everybody. I don't know.
I think
But if you,
I think a lot of designers who aren't new just have never been published and they're trying to figure out how to crack that nut a little bit. And this is
yeah,
great. I think,
well, again, the first thing, and I'm beating this to death. You got to have the photos. So the photos are going to be if you don't have them, you could be the most
doesn't matter.
charismatic interior designer on the planet.
Yeah.
It's not going in the magazine. So that's your main thing, right? 80% of everything is going to be those images. Then just reach out, because I get emails occasionally, but again, I think people are intimidated to email, and you can't find my email, because I'm
Maybe you're
not on
busy
the
and you're
mass.
not sure,
Right.
there's
People
lots of,
worry that people are busy, but this is what our job is. And so again, you're our fuel. We are thrilled to hear from you, right? And now if the work's not good, I can't do anything with it, right?
Right.
But if it is good, I need to know about it, because if I don't know that it exists,
Right.
I'm not magically going to know
We
you
need to
exist.
keep
So
in
feel
touch
free to email
with our
people. Yeah,
editors. Yeah.
just email. You can call. Here's what I would think I would do just to make life easy, is because mastheads change,
Yep.
right? Different people are involved depending on the magazine. I would just call like their main number that you can see in the magazine. You'll get somebody answering a phone, and just explain, hey, I'm a designer in town and I've got a house that I think would be perfect for the magazine. Who is the person I need to talk to? And they will give you a name, a title, an email address, etc. And but as you flip through magazines, because I'm guessing as a designer, you're going to look at you always want to look at magazines to see what's new and cool, if in fact magazines have that. And you're going to see names, right? You'll see my name, right, as a byline. You'll see other people's names. Well, you can just Google them
Right.
at that point. You can find a LinkedIn address or somebody's email address, or you can then call the magazine and say, hey, I really like to send an email to this person. Can you give me their email address? I mean, that's totally cool. We have no problem with that. And people call me, people will call me and just ask me questions. I don't mind
Wow. Well, because
chatting.
you're very approachable. And I think the other thing that I wanted, designers to realize is, if an editor's reaching out to you, if you're on the list, right? If you're on the list where they're looking for content and they email you, for God's sakes, please email them back immediately.
Yeah. There's no doubt.
Within 2 hours. Like, I think that's really, really important.
Yes, doubt to somebody else, because it's a mass hysteria at that point, where
Yeah.
we are like, oh my God, let me reach out to everybody. And it could be a first come, first serve scenario.
Yep.
So that's why you just, and even though that's a rarity, frankly, you should reach out as soon as possible, even if you can't answer the question, or even if you don't have a house or whatever right there. At least reach back out and say, oh my God, hey, so thank you for reaching out. But I'm in the middle of a meeting with a client.
Yep.
Let me touch back to you like in a couple hours, or I'm traveling. I'm going to be back in the morning. Can I do that? So at least we know that you're
Aware.
able and responding, right? So there are plenty of designers that do not do that.
Yes,
Right?
don't be one of
So
those, ladies and
don't be one of
gentlemen.
those. And there are plenty of them, right? That I'm in the process of trying to find houses right now. And, I'm going through and I'm sending emails to people, and,
To the void.
weeks have gone by where I haven't heard from
Yeah. And
these
here's the other
people.
thing for our listeners to remember is, because this has happened even in my own market here, is that not only there are magazines, but there's newspapers and weekly, publications.
Absolutely.
And these people may be involved in those as well. So
Right.
timing
Right.
might be even faster than you may
Yeah,
realize, because they may be working.
absolutely. Right. And that is funny that I used to do the Lux Living section
Yep.
at Florida Weekly.
Yes.
And so I did that as well. I did all of it. So that was a different thing. And I needed people for different things. And some people stick around, right? So it's a situation where I've been here since 2011.
Okay. Yeah.
And so while I haven't done home stuff that entire time that I was here, but I've been at the magazine, in one capacity or another since 2011. And, I don't forget.
I mean, we've known each other probably since 2011. I mean, I don't even know, a long
it
time.
wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, but it's a situation where you just need, sometimes people stick around and you become friendly with them, and you could at any time you could text me, call me, email me, even if you didn't have a house, right? You can call me. That's cool, right?
Well, I'm gonna put you on my list then.
Absolutely, do it.
I'll call you. I'll be like, hey, what's happening?
Hey, what's happening?
What's happening with your house?
I know, right? Yeah, exactly. It'll be this exact conversation all over again. but I don't think that that's ever a problem for you to reach out to people and know that we are looking for things. You should never be bashful or shy.
Yeah, so we should stay in touch regularly, right? We
I
should,
think so. I mean, yeah, you should. I hope that you have projects,
yes, for reasons
right?
having
Because you
projects.
know what I mean. Like,
Yeah,
I hope that something is happening that makes sense, and that I need to be in touch with you often.
right,
And obviously, the bigger the designer you are, the busier you are, the more projects you're going to have.
right.
And again, just kind of like to even go a different way. I mean, I'm also looking for things from architects and from builders,
Gotcha.
right? So
Okay, so
there's,
architects and builders, you too. We want to hear from you, right?
yeah,
Everybody hear from
absolutely,
you. Yep.
absolutely. Now, builders, it's an interesting thing. Builders normally have publicists, and they will hire an outside group
Right.
to reach out.
And talk and
Architects and interior designers normally have, either they do it themselves or they have somebody on their staff that's going to be reaching out.
right.
Um, I normally don't remember any of the staff people. Not that I don't remember, but it's like, I don't know if it's this person. So I'm going to email you,
You're going to
right,
the
Pam?
top of the
I'm
heap,
coming to
right?
you.
You're coming to
Yeah,
just like we should go
yeah,
to the editor. You're going to the owner, right?
yes, right. So to me, I'm just like, okay, well, let's, don't be bashful, because we need the content. You want your stuff to be seen, and we may get to this as well. Remember, it doesn't need to be an entire house per se. Okay,
Okay.
most of the time it does, right?
It
And I'm going to
helps
say
have more shots, right?
yes, I would say 90+%. But depending on like a thing like Gulf Shore Life or Home, a lot of times we will do some interesting side feature stuff, right? Because it doesn't want to be just a book of houses. Let's maybe we're going to focus on bathrooms. Like, we'll do a feature on cool bathrooms, and
Right.
there'll be a thing just on that, or there'll be a thing on cool master bedrooms, or primary suites, or whatever we're going to do.
Right.
We can have some real niche stuff in there. And so if you've got one really super awesome thing, again, the image has got to be awesome,
Yeah.
right? It's got to be a magazine image. Um, but there are moments where you're just like, hey, I've got this spectacular bathroom. It's going to blow your mind. Take a look at it. And if you think you're ever going to do something that this could work for you,
Mhm.
please consider it.
Yes.
That's all you have to say,
So don't be shy. There's the lesson learned is just, send along great projects because you,
Yeah. I mean, and even if you don't, you can always introduce yourself. If you just moved to town,
yep.
and there is a home editor, I mean, I don't think you want to do it necessarily. If we didn't have such a huge home focus here, um, you're not just going to probably randomly call up the magazine editor and say, hey, I'd like to take you out to lunch. Um,
Well, you
if
could
they
say
don't
what you're
plan,
looking for, right? What kind of things you're
absolutely,
looking
you
for.
can. Yeah, certainly you can, for sure, for sure. Um, but if they don't do a lot of home stuff, you're now creating that hole. Like, which is absolutely great. Editors still need stuff, even
Yeah.
if they don't do home stuff. So you should think outside the box in those scenarios.
Mhm.
But for us who are just super home centric, just call us, just email us. You're cool.
Show us your stuff. So don't be shy. Be sure to keep in touch. The quality of the image is huge. Don't forget to take
Yep.
lots of images
Yep.
that
Well,
tell
again,
the
you'll
story.
right, and you're going to grab a photographer who hopefully knows
Interior
kind of what. Right,
architecture.
right, and you'll find those. Flip through the magazines. You'll see what the names of these photographers are. We have a lot of photographers here, and they don't always produce amazing stuff. I mean, there are sometimes that something's just off,
Yeah.
right? But hopefully not for your project when you've hired them. But sometimes it just doesn't work. And you mentioned there's a thing that you want to feature, because all of these photos really are going to be used on your website,
Yeah.
right? These are things that you should be featuring on your Instagram, your social media, and your website.
Right.
And so you want them to be the best they can be anyway, right? And so that's a huge thing. You may as well spend the money, get the best you can get. Another caveat here would be, because like Home Magazine is so big,
Mhm.
sometimes houses haven't been shot yet, right? And our deadline is such that we could, so like right now, like let's say next week is the deadline for selections for Home, right? The next issue of Home.
Yeah.
So let's just say that that's the case. And but we can wait. We're not going to print and do a lot of that real work until September. We'll have designers just take cell shots of the home as it's in progress because it's not finished. And at that point, hopefully we as editors can see enough to say, oh, this one's got real potential. This probably will not work for a new designer that we don't know.
Right.
But if you're an established one, you've got a track record, we already know who you are, we can see those cell phone shots and be pretty confident, right, that it's going to come out pretty great.
Yeah.
And then we may even schedule our own photographer.
That's a great question.
Shoot.
I was going to ask you that. Like, what is the criteria that you guys use by whether or not you're going to use the photographs or conversely send a photographer out? Is there some reasoning behind either of those?
So there's two reasons how this would play out. We're going to use the images that you've sent if they're great.
Yep.
Right. So if they fit our bill, that is a whim based on whichever editor you're going to get.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
So they may not like. There's things, and in fact, you had mentioned this earlier. Like it's whatever the designer's aesthetic is and what they like to see. I have a thing about lighting.
Yep.
When I see an image, man, I like to be able to see what's happening in this room. Yeah. Right. I like it to be, I don't want it to be so crazy bright that it's insane, but I do want it. I want it to really wash over me with light. Plenty of people don't like that. Plenty of people like the no lights on the inside of this house on, and it's a moody, dark saturation. Yeah. Right. That's a big thing. And I do get that. But just know that sometimes I'm in the mood for that. Sometimes I'm not in the mood for that. And some editors are only for that.
Yeah.
And plenty of other editors are like, oh no, it's got to be light this place up so I can see. You're not going to know that. And I get that you're not going to know. So the best you can do is look at the magazines and say, this is kind of what they tend to do most.
General feeling of that.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's still different. Go ahead.
I was going to say, for sending out a photographer, is it just that it hasn't quite gotten done yet, and now you're just gonna,
that would be the number one reason is that it hasn't been done yet, and we just want to make sure that we're going to get what we want,
get what you need,
right? Versus you've already shot it, it's a spectacular home, but the pictures didn't really come out that great.
Gotcha.
You know,
or wasn't what you guys were looking for, right? There's peaks of things that are happening maybe off to the side. You're like, I wish you had.
Right. I mean, it could be that they've just shot the angles wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like again, don't forget, like there are real estate photographers, right? And they shoot houses all day, every day. And they kind of get a lot of this stuff right. And then they don't, So I wouldn't go hire, even though they shoot real estate per se, it's still not magazine stuff that they're shooting. So there is something to be said. We will see pictures of the, spectacular beachfront mansion that everything has been done right. It's a beautiful house, but the lighting wasn't right. The angles weren't right. And so now we're like, but it's still good enough that we should send somebody
out.
Again, that doesn't happen all the time. It's pretty rare. And frankly, the business being what it is, so much better if you've got the stuff done. Yeah, it's super rare.
It's so much easier all around. And then one thing I wanted to ask you is, because this comes up as well, is at what point, if we have a project that we photographed and maybe it's on our website or we've posted it on Instagram, at what point does the project not become of interest to an editor because it's already been, say, published somewhere else? And what is that criteria where you guys are like, yes, this is great, but we're not going to use this project?
So this is a sliding scale also based on each magazine and its own staff, right? And what they think. Most of the time we will not run a home that is run in another magazine.
Gotcha.
Most magazines have like kind of a content, like a little clause that says you can't publish this anywhere else for 6 months at least, right? And so there will always be that. As far as you having it on your Instagram and on your website, I don't think those things matter as much to
Okay.
me. Again, if it's sat around for 5 years and nobody's touched it, I don't know what our level of desperation is that suddenly that's going to be so important to us. But these things, it happens, right?
Right.
Depending. However, I will say what I personally don't think I like so much is I don't want to run a house that you've already used in an ad,
Oh, gotcha. Good news.
right? So if you're printing an ad and you're using this spectacular image,
Hmm.
I hope that image is already run someplace.
Yes.
You know
Okay.
what I mean? Let it get in the magazine as a feature first
Hmm.
versus, it being in all your ads for the past 6 months.
And now,
And now you want to put it in the magazine. And I'm like, we've seen this for
yes,
six
it's
months in the
seen too
magazine. So
long.
that doesn't work.
Okay, that's great to know. And so you've been so generous with giving us so much information about how to, get ourselves in touch with editors, the type of quality of images and the stories that they're looking for, visually. If there's one thing a designer could do today to improve their chances of getting in a feature, what would you suggest for them?
Well, again, it's the same thing we talked about at the beginning.
Let's
It's
hammer it
going to
home if that's
be
what it is, right?
it's the image. It
Yeah.
has to be great because that's all we care about at the magazine, really.
Hmm.
The image must be spectacular. If it's not now, again, a newspaper could be different, right? A weekly, because the print quality is just different, right? And
Right.
so on a newspaper versus a weekly, that is newsprint stuff. That is not going to be high-end glossy magazine. They may have different, by the way, these images should be 300 DPI for a magazine,
Yes.
right? Don't send me 72 that works for your website. You make sure the photographer has been doing 300 DPI at magazine size, just so there's no question. But the thing that really will matter for any designer is to make sure you've got great images,
Hmm.
and then don't be bashful.
Yeah.
Reach out, because I'm truly happy to hear from somebody. And if I don't know them, that's totally cool. You could be, from out of town. You could be a brand new designer. That doesn't make a difference if you're a newbie or a seasoned pro.
Yeah.
It's the work that's going to make a difference.
Hmm.
So you need to, this could be the first project you've ever done, and miraculously it looks
Amazing.
insane.
Yeah.
Then, my gosh, absolutely call us, because I don't know everybody. I'm not looking, there is a list. I will not lie that we don't have a list of people, but you get on that list because somehow we've known you exist,
Right.
right? And
Mhm.
you can get on that list just by emailing me,
Right.
right? And saying,
Be
hey,
on the
I just
list.
got here,
Add me to
right?
the
And I'm
list.
I'm cool. You should know who I am.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, okay, you're on the list. And then I'm going to email you next time and say, hey, do you have anything?
Yeah.
So that's just, it's simple.
I
I
love
think it's simple.
I love it. So don't be shy and send your projects along. That's what the moral of the story, and make sure that they're great photographs. Michael, thank
Yeah.
you so much for imparting all your wisdom. I think that this is gonna really help people get away from the stigma of, you know, sending in projects and reaching out to the editors in their area. So I think it's been a great help. Thank you so much.
You are absolutely welcome. I'm thrilled to have gotten a chance to finally chat with you on here. And, again, these people are looking for your work. So don't be bashful. We open emails every day, and from people I don't know. I'm happy to do it, and so I think it's great, and you'll get so far ahead. Don't get in your head about it.
Yeah.
Get ahead, right? So
What a perfect way to finish. So thank you so much.
my pleasure.